Hello and welcome to another session on the short stories, A Silent Song and Other Stories, and specifically An Incident in the Park, a story written by Meja Mwangi from Kenya. Welcome, I'm Teacher Nancy. Let's look for those details that we write whenever we are given an essay for paper 3. So An Incident in the Park is set in an urban center. We assume this is Nairobi because the story is from Kenya, but you're not told, so remember, don't mention Nairobi unless you're asked. Now, we focus a lot on the challenges of urbanization and challenges of the urban poor specifically. We are addressing people in a park, in a central part of a city, and the challenges they face, especially if they're poor and they have no jobs. It's normally very difficult for them to survive. So the story focuses on that a lot. We also have matters to do with police harassment in the story. There's an incident that actually takes place in this park, but it's surrounded by a number of other activities. So we shall come to that incident later in the story. But first things first, so let's start. The story begins on page 6 of the anthology. We have a description of the park. The park is doing poorly. There has not been rain for quite some time. We are told not a promise of a drop of rain in August. The drought had taken a heavy toll on that park. The ground was deep, dusty, brown, bare, and parched, which means no vegetation at all. It's so dry. Dried bits of grass stuck forlornly on the numerous cracks on the ground. There were dry leaves that were shed by the thirsty trees. And so it's that bad. The city's desperate effort to keep itself beautiful was not working out. So there were problems of poor weather. Now it had what they describe on page 6 as oppressive sun. The sun was so oppressive, but we have people eking out a living in this park. They see it, and there are those who try businesses that are not making profit at all. We begin with the park loungers. These are people who just, they are said to just waste time lying idle, most probably because they have no jobs, or maybe they're people who have nothing to make them get up in the morning and go anywhere. So what they do is just lie down on the park. We are told every now and then a misplaced person rose with a start, squinted at the clocks. The clocks cling after an hour, and there are those who are idle, so they feel the clock is really annoying them. They want to just sit there and sleep. So one person stands up and points a finger at the clock, accusing fingers. And then we have others who just shook their heads defiantly. They don't like the sound of the clock, and they curse loudly, and they face the other way, and they go back to sleep. Now there's something here the writer says on page 7. If they had anywhere to go at all, they certainly did not want to go there. So most likely they're just here. So the sounds of the cars braying, the brakes, and the rest does not affect them. The park people were there to stay. They had arrived. And they're told they had nowhere to go. So these are people you could say are homeless, and they could also be jobless. And that is already a challenge as far as these people in these urban centers concerned. At the stroke of one, there's a dam burst. That means a flood of hungry workers from the office, the ministerial's office that are just across the park, go down. They come in armies. They walk across the park to go for their lunch. We shall find out what is it that they eat. So when they go for lunch, the writer says on page 7, they rush to meat roasting places down River Road. And most likely that is where maybe the food is very cheap. And others go to fish and cheap joints where they dutifully swallowed soggy fried chips with watered down ketchup. So you can imagine soggy means it's not well cooked. Watered down ketchup means the tomato sauce is full of water. So it's a very poor quality food. And they are told this is something they also suffer from in these urban centers, not getting proper meals. And maybe because the jobs are not well paying, which is also another challenge. We also have people like the ice cream seller. There are 2 ice cream men. The first one on the eastern exit, and the second one is trying to block the other side of the highway to make a sale but you're told not one bar of ice cream was bought by the hungry workers. They can't afford the ice cream, and that kind of business does not really succeed for these people who are doing this business. We are told the ice cream man's bell still rang lonely and unwelcome, like a lost leper's warning bell. Yeah, unwelcome. People cannot afford the ice cream. They feel it is a luxury, so to them they do not really go for it. Now we still have other issues apart from these hungry office workers, who we could say have very poor jobs because they can't afford proper meals. Another challenge again is the poor food they're eating. But then we also have others with very poor health. Still on page 7, the last paragraph, we have under the bare trees, we have a shaggy thin man sat under a shrub. That's the description of a shaggy thin man, scratching numbers and letters on his black dry skin with a used match. But the skin is dry, and he's trying to scrabble that, and he has 2 oversized fruit baskets that he has been trying to sell since morning. And then he's also scratching his head, and he's mumbling to himself, and he's cursing on, rolling up his trousers and continuing with the drawing, writing on his thigh. He's trying to calculate if there's any profit is made, but we realize it's not doing much. But again, the description of this guy tells us that he's of very poor health. Still on the next page 8, the first paragraph, we are told after doing all that mathematics, he fell unceremoniously on his back. That means things are not working out. And he covered his rough bearded face with 2 bony hands. That is a sign of poor health. This man does not maybe get enough to eat. So we have an issue with this man who was sitting under the trees and trying to calculate how much he had sold of the fruits. We'll come back to this fruit seller, another business here in the park. We shall come back to him shortly. We have other people in the park. We have the boat watchers. These people, they watched the boats. They sat at 2 or 3 and they're watching the rowers. The rowers who are rowing the boats on the park. There's a small lake and they're eking out a living from that. But we have watchers who just sit there. A few others sat on a cement bank doing nothing. They just watched the boats. And that tells you that most likely they're jobless, or maybe they have no job, specific job to go to, so they just sit and watch. And that is what they do all day. We have, apart from them, we also have a hairy loafer. This is also another idle person who is also found at the lake. He's sitting there with worn slippers. Again, in terms of clothing, they're doing very badly. Worn slippers, and he's sitting on that piece of wood written, "Do not feed fish by order." But of course, he's trying to feed them some debris. Then the same hairy loafer is said on page 8 there to roll up his torn trouser legs, exposing thin, hairy. I want you to look at the description of the people in the park. We have this loafer who is said to expose thin, hairy legs. So the matters to do with poor health coming up. Poor sanitation again, he scratched his long uncombed hair. The thin man who was also scratching the fruit seller was also said not to be clean. We are told he would scrub his dry skin with a matchstick and would wet his palm with saliva to try to erase whatever he had scribbled. Matters sanitation here. And then we also have a conversation between this hairy loafer and a man who joins him at the pool on page 8 to 9. But then again, we have them talking about the ice cream seller. They refer to him as a crazy man. Would you believe that man is crazy? According to the hairy loafer, this guy is crazy because he tries to call people and nobody comes to buy the ice cream. But then again, we know it's because of that. Now, as they sit, the hairy loafer has a problem, and that is that of hunger. He's very hungry. His stomach rumbled, and suddenly he turned his red eyes angrily on the other man's cigarette. His only solution is the cigarette, maybe to keep him going, because most likely he cannot get the food. And when he gets it, he's a very happy man, and he tells the man, "Thank you, you are my brother." You see that level of dehumanization that has affected these people here. Then we come back to the fruit seller. We have an incident where he gets harassed by the police. But before that, we have page 12. to do with the poor food. Bodies rose like zombies from under the shrunken trees and shrubs. We are told that they rose like zombies. That is not a good sign. It means there are some who just lie there with no proper food, and so they just lie under the shrunken trees, and they flung away the newspapers which wrap the potato chips. So they feed on potato chips. Again, the issue of poor food. Coming back to our fruit seller, he's stooping with as he tries to carry the large fruit baskets on his shoulder, one on the left and one on the right. But then, as he try to get to the pathways, two city constables accost him, and they demand first for his license. He searches for it, he doesn't have it. He says it is home. Then they demand for his ID card. He doesn't have it, and so he offers to give them 5 shillings. He says, that is all I have made today. It shows business is bad in this urban center. He's only made 5 shillings, and he's trying to plead with the constables to accept this. But they refuse and say, no license, no identification. This one has to be taken to the judge. The man pleads with them that the judge will... he calls the judge a tyrant. That means there's a lot of unfairness, most probably in the city. He says the judge will have me hang this time round. And you see, brothers, he's referring to the constables as brothers. He's desperate. I've got this other case coming up next week. I was only selling this time to afford the fine. So the selling of the oranges was to afford the fine for another case that is again pending for him. And then he gives them 1 basket plus the 5 shillings. It doesn't work. He gets to 10 shillings plus 1 basket. The constables still are not budging. And as a last resort, he throws the orange baskets at the constables and tries to flee away, because the only solution is for him to try and get away. But he tried to run, all right, a couple of 100 yards between him and... but then again, somebody nabbed him, because when the people see somebody running and the police shouting, they assume this person could have stolen, could be a thief. So he stumbled and fell in a ditch on the highway. People came with stones. Another issue here is suspicion. Whenever you're found to be chased like that, people assume that all is not well. They ran up the fruit peddler. When they arrived there, by the time the constable reached, he lay like a broken, twisted rag doll at the bottom of the ditch. What a description. A chunk of rock as large as the one the loaf had thrown at the fish had drawn thick red blood over his sparsely bearded face. And the people kept calling him a thief without even confirmation, so they suffer from suspicion. But then again, there is this constable that arrives and feels around the neck of the fruit seller, and I shook his head and said, this person is dead. That was his verdict. And the people wanted to believe that this person is a thief without having confirmed what is it that he had stolen. But we also told that spread from one person to the other, those who were there. And the writer says, here lay a desperate thief, attired in the unmistakable uniform of his trade, dirty torn clothes and a mean, hungry face. So in the city, if somebody looks like this, he's suspected, and that puts that person in a lot of danger. You're told there's no justice, because people took action in their hands and actually killed this man. And the only thing was to take him to the mortuary, and they wait identification by the next of kin, who are his wife and children. We also have something about these people at the end of the story on page 12. We are told the park remained calm and peaceful after the fruit seller, the dead man, was taken away. But according to the people at the park, they did not particularly care. That is a sign that people have lost hope. They're disillusioned, they don't give a damn, and that is how the story ends. And this shows us that in most urban centers, people suffer a lot, especially the urban poor, and that can be brought out by the numerous illustrations we have brought out to do with the killings that we have seen, one person being killed out of suspicion, matter suspicion. We had police harassment. We had the poor clothes, which make people suspect them, like the fruit seller. The poor health, the way the legs looks like, the way he was scratching the thin and with bony hands, the thin legs with bony hands. Then we had issues to do with lack of proper jobs. The ice cream sellers are trying to sell, they're not selling. Then we also had matters of the park lounges. They bought watchers, people are idle, and then people from the offices who also cannot afford proper meals, and so they suffer. So let's bring out correct details as far as incident in the park is concerned as we prepare for our paper 3 on the short stories. Thanks. Welcome once more.